thank you for having us out here. Such a great story when it comes to your career and how it all started with Ohio Farm Bureau, and really your agriculture story started with Ohio Farm Bureau as well.
Yeah. It was, we started. I grew up in the city, so I'm a city kid, and I worked in a garden center in my high school years, and they begged me to stay, and I said no. I want to go on to ag school and be a dairy farmer at the time. And then got involved in the ag school and bought the very rundown farm in the mid '70s, and worked at the Ohio Research Center and the swine farm, and that's when I got more interested in hogs. Well, back then, you could get in the hog business a little bit less capital than the dairy business. Of course, that's all changed now. It's all big high capital. But back then, worked there and started my own operation, and my goal was to raise feeder pigs. We ended up raising pigs from conception to market, and we got up to about selling a semi-load a week, and then in the early 2000s, I voluntarily decided that things were changing, and I got out of the hog business voluntarily. I always tell people voluntarily, because most people go hog business, it's not voluntary. and and we decided to go a different route, and we had some rentals, and then I got involved in politics. And I tell people the only reason I got involved in politics, you don't like where I'm at, you can blame Farm Bureau, because that's where I got my public affairs experience. All those years in Farm Bureau and on the board, and work with people like Bill Swank and others, and I would never have ran for a public office.
We'll talk more about your political career in a bit. Take me back to the first day you learned about Ohio Farm Bureau.
Well, I'll never forget, it was a Saturday afternoon, and I just finished eating lunch, getting ready to head back out. And back then, I had a full-time job. I had a 45, almost an hour drive to work, and then an hour drive back home, and trying to, clean up this old farm. It was all in weeds. I was brush hogging, and the barn was falling over, so weekends I had to really be intense. And so a gentleman type farmer, that lived a couple miles away, I always had a high respect. And he came over, Carl came over, and of course he was a general type farmer. He was a full-time farmer, but he had some chickens, some hogs, some beef, and he could tell you stories about how he used to load up his livestock and go a couple miles to Lakeville and put them on the train. So he'd been around for a while. And so anyways, he comes over, he's got starch biblical overalls, and he starts telling me about Farm Bureau. And back then I had no idea, because I didn't grow up in the rural area. I didn't know it, didn't have 4-H, didn't Farm Bureau, Future Farmers of America. I had no clue any of that. It was all foreign to me. And so he starts telling me about how great Farm Bureau and all the great things they're doing. And I'm sitting there listening, and he's going on and on. I'm thinking, I got to get out back to work. I can't sit here all day and talk to Carl. I love Carl. And so finally, after he goes on for over an hour, I said to Carl, I'm thinking, how am I going to tell Carl that I can't join because I'm not going to be able to afford this? Because he's telling me all this great stuff, and I go, it's going to be at least $400. And this is, mid 1970s, like $400. I didn't have it, and I couldn't afford to do anything. And so finally, I said to Carl, how much is it? And he goes, I forget what it was, $30, whatever it was. And I couldn't get my checkbook fast enough. And so I wrote the check, got him out, and got back to work. But that's how I found out about Farm Bureau. It was a membership drive, and the next year they came out and got my wife and I to work on membership. And the next year they got us to be the chairman of the committee. And we went around, because we didn't know anybody who were new to the county. And we went around and got other couples around our age from all over the county. We put together the membership committee, and we had a gangbuster year. And then I was on the board, and I got elected the county Farm Bureau president. And then I guess close in the mid '80s, the opening on the state board came open, and I ran a 3-year race, and I won. And that's when I started my career on the board, from like 1985 to 2002. I think it was 2001, and president in the late '90s.
Why did you get so involved?
That's a good question. I guess I've always been kind of getting involved in things, but it's just upset that things are going. And agriculture is a very tough business. You got to put capital. You go sign your name at the farm credit, like I did, and all that, and you don't. And people don't realize we don't set our prices unless you have a niche and you're selling a niche market. We're selling commodities, and we buy retail and sell wholesale, and so you need an entity out there that's looking after you in the government regulatory field and the policy field, and I just kind of got involved with that. So I found it interesting, and it did give you a break off the farm.
The only state president ever to serve in Congress in Washington, D.C. That's for any state and
Yeah,
Puerto Rico.
when I got elected to Congress, the American Farm Bureau did a little research, and it turns out in the history of American Farm Bureau, I'm the only former State Farm Bureau president elected to Congress.
When you got to the Hill, was it what you expected?
Somewhat, because I served 8 years in the legislature, 6 in the House and 2 in the state Senate. But things are a little different. You're one of 435 in the House, and so the numbers are different.
What did it mean for you to represent agriculture? I mean, you're one of the few farmers in Congress that knew about farming and about land rights and about eminent domain. What did it mean for you to be that face and voice in D.C.?
Well, it was an education from the standpoint when I've been in committee hearings or just meetings in general. Some of my colleagues, they would say things or ask questions, and it was obvious to me they didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue how our tax policy affects farmers on all business, small businesses. On the regulatory side, they don't have a clue. And unfortunately, there's a lot of members in Congress that never ran a business and just don't have that experience. So when I've had a young person come and talk to me about wanting to run for Congress, I first say, well, what have you done? And I think it ought to be a prerequisite that you should have been involved in a business, and let alone raise a family. You have that experience because you're making the laws that affect every American, and you never experienced how that, what the impact is, what the consequences are.
Decades of a career. Your basement shows all the memories and all the accomplishments that you've made over the years, the friendships. What would you like your takeaway to be for your career through Ohio Farm Bureau, through the state legislature, and on Capitol Hill?
In Congress and in the legislature, people would be amazed all the constituent work we do for individuals, families, and businesses. And obviously, nobody knows about that unless you're that specific individual or businesses. And we've done some things that's actually saved some businesses, saved families, saved their livelihood, actually had one that actually saved their freedom.
One of the most interesting parts for you, I have to imagine, being that you are a County Farm Bureau president, is hosting County Farm Bureau presidents when they come to D.C.
One of my first trips to Washington, D.C. was County Farm Bureau president's trip. And we always did the embassy, we always did USDA, met with the Secretary of Agriculture, and always had the forum. John Boehner was doing it then. And of course, he got elected speaker, so he was kind of busy doing other things. So he came to me and he goes, Gibbs, you're doing this. Not really a choice. and I said, yeah, I understand. So I did it. And we tried to bring in the chairman, we were in the majority then, the chairman of Ways and Means and Ag and all that. And everybody had, great, everybody says it's the best part of the trip. And I said that back when I was county president. And this year, the county presidents are coming again here in September. Troy Ballerson, I turned the wand over to Troy Ballerson, and he's doing it. And he's on Ag Committee, and as I'm not going to be there anymore, so I thought it's time to turn that over and get Troy involved more.
It shows that the grassroots process works, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I had everybody. It was kind of funny when I get Leader McCarthy to come in, Speaker Ryan, all these leaders in the Congress to come in and talk. Everybody just thought I was something special, because I could have came in for, all the other state farm bureaus don't get that. That doesn't happen. They tell me, and it probably happens some, but and they just thought it was because of me. It was really easy. All I had to do was just go ask them. It wasn't too hard for them. It's in the same complex there. It's not like having to come out to Columbus or something, and so it was really easy, and it was easy because they wanted to meet with them. And I think our elected representatives do like to meet with the actual constituents and the actual people, the farmers, versus your hired lobbyists. We have relationships with lobbyists, but when you hear it from a farmer, when a farmer comes in and say, hey, if this tax thing goes through the way it is, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to pass the farm on to the next generation. I don't know how we're going to stay in business. And then, lays the figures out. It's the truth, and you can see. I've had landscapers come in, and they have a problem with, and some farmers do too, with labor. Finding labor, landscaping, really they do, and they come in, and I think that immigration and the guest worker program should have been separated. We could have fixed the guest worker program, even though we can't get the immigration. Of course, we should have got that fixed too, but that's another issue. But you could hear, how it was directly impacting them, and you could see it. It's true. They're not pulling the wool over our eyes. They're the actual impact. These are real people, real issues, and we could do something, and that's what happens. So it is important. So I hope Farm Bureau never does away with that.
Well, on behalf of Ohio Farm Bureau and all of our members, thank you very much for your work on all levels, including Ohio Farm Bureau, state and federal levels. Thank you very much for your service.
Thanks, it's been a great ride.